The numbers don't lie, and sometimes they sting. When reports broke that Caitlin Clark's Indiana Fever saw a 47% drop in ratings during the playoffs, the internet lit up like wildfire. To her critics, it felt like the perfect gotcha moment. To her fans, it was a gut punch. And to the WNBA, it was a sign that nothing about this new era is guaranteed. This isn't just about basketball games on TV. It's about hype, expectations, and what happens when the brightest star in the sport collides with the brutal reality of ratings. Because for months, Caitlin Clark wasn't just a rookie. She was the story. She was selling out arenas, setting viewership records, making headlines everywhere from ESPN to TikTok. But when the playoffs came around, the numbers told a different story, and everyone had an opinion. If you're here for the full breakdown, not the spin, not the watered-down version, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop your thoughts in the comments because this one is messy, dramatic, and bigger than just a stat sheet. To understand why the 47% playoff ratings drop for Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever hit as hard as it did, you first have to rewind the clock. This wasn't just another rookie entering the league. This was the most hyped debut in WNBA history, a cultural phenomenon packaged into a 22-year-old guard from Iowa who had already redefined what was possible for women's basketball. Before Caitlin even set foot on a WNBA court, she was drawing unprecedented attention. Her final season at Iowa broke viewership records for women's college basketball. Millions tuned in to watch her NCAA tournament run, with numbers rivaling major men's sporting events. Entire arenas sold out just to see her warm up. Bars that had never shown women's hoops suddenly had every Iowa game on their TVs. By the time draft night came around, Caitlin wasn't just a player. She was a brand, a storyline, a movement. When the Indiana Fever drafted her, the franchise instantly transformed from an afterthought into the most talked-about team in the league. The Fever hadn't been a ratings draw for years, but Caitlin's arrival changed everything. Ticket sales spiked overnight. Season passes sold out. Road games suddenly became hot commodities because fans across the country wanted to see her in person. Merchandise sales soared, with her jersey becoming one of the most popular in all of basketball. Not just the WNBA. And the media couldn't get enough. ESPN, ABC, TNT, networks that rarely highlighted women's games, suddenly made the Fever must-see TV. Analysts compared her impact to LeBron James as a rookie, not just in terms of skill, but in cultural gravity. Headlines weren't just about wins or losses anymore. They were about the Caitlin Clark effect. That effect was real. Early in the season, Fever games posted record-breaking ratings. One matchup against the Chicago Sky pulled in over 2 million viewers, an unheard-of number for the league. Clips of Caitlin draining logo threes or dropping no-look dimes went viral on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Even people who couldn't name another WNBA player knew who Caitlin Clark was. She wasn't just boosting the league, she was carrying it. So when the playoffs came around, the narrative was set. This was supposed to be the culmination of Caitlin's historic rookie year. Fans expected another ratings surge, another round of record numbers. The Fever weren't projected to dominate the postseason, but with Caitlin at the helm, anything felt possible. For casual fans, it didn't even matter if the Fever won. They wanted to see Caitlin play under the brightest lights. And then, the numbers told a very different story. Instead of climbing, viewership collapsed. Playoff ratings for the Fever dropped by a staggering 47%. For critics, this was the opening they had been waiting for. See, they said. The Caitlin Clark hype was a bubble. People tuned in for the novelty, but when it mattered most, the audience wasn't there. The headlines shifted from celebration to skepticism. Analysts who once called her the savior of the sport now questioned if she could carry it long-term. For her fans, it was a gut punch. How could the same player who had set viewership records just months before suddenly see numbers crater? The reaction was mixed. Some blamed the league for poor scheduling, others pointed to fatigue among casual fans who had jumped on the bandwagon but weren't yet loyal to the WNBA. And of course, some said it wasn't Caitlin's fault at all, it was the Fever's. The team around her wasn't ready for the spotlight, and without a deep playoff run, the hype train had nothing to feed on. But the truth, as always, is more complicated. The 47% drop wasn't about Caitlyn suddenly losing her magic. It was about what happens when the burden of carrying an entire league falls on the shoulders of one player. No rookie, no matter how talented, can sustain record-breaking momentum on their own. Fans who had tuned in purely for the Caitlyn Clark experience wanted fireworks every night. But basketball doesn't work that way. Teams need time. Stars need supporting casts. And revolutions aren't linear. The Fever's struggles were visible all season. They were young, inconsistent, and often overmatched against veteran teams. Caitlyn could put up big numbers, but she couldn't cover every weakness. In the regular season, her presence alone was enough to keep fans engaged. But in the playoffs, when stakes rise and narratives tighten, casual fans weren't willing to stick around if the Fever weren't winning. That's where the ratings crash came from. Not a loss of interest in Caitlyn, but the clash between hype and reality. And here's the bigger truth. Revolutions in sports are always messy. Michael Jordan didn't win a championship in his rookie season. LeBron didn't deliver Cleveland a title out of the gate. What they did do was capture attention, build momentum, and lay the foundation for something greater. Caitlyn Clark is doing the same. The drop in ratings isn't the end of her effect. It's a reminder that long-term change takes more than one season. But the narrative battle is brutal. Critics jumped on the numbers to declare the hype overblown. Supporters doubled down, pointing out that even with a decline, Caitlyn still pulled viewership numbers higher than most WNBA games had ever seen. And in the middle of it all was Caitlyn herself. Quiet, composed, refusing to feed the drama, letting her play do the talking. So yes, the 47% decline was dramatic. Yes, it gave ammo to her detractors. But it also exposed the impossible expectations placed on her from the start. No rookie should be tasked with carrying an entire league's viewership on her back. Yet Caitlyn Clark has already proven she's capable of doing things no one else in women's basketball has done. The rise before the fall was meteoric. The drop was jarring. But the story isn't over, it's just entering its next chapter. Because Caitlyn Clark's impact can't be measured by one playoff series, one ratings dip, or one season. She's bigger than that. And the world knows it. When word spread that playoff ratings for Caitlyn Clark's Indiana Fever had dropped nearly 47%, it sparked one of the loudest debates in recent memory. Was this proof that the Caitlyn Clark effect was a temporary bubble? Or was it simply the natural consequence of overhype colliding with reality? To answer that, you have to understand the expectations that had been built around her from the moment she stepped into the WNBA. Caitlyn Clark wasn't introduced to the world like a normal rookie. Most first-year players come in quietly, maybe with a local fan base cheering them on and modest coverage from sports outlets. Caitlyn entered the league with the weight of millions on her back. Her college games had drawn audiences larger than NBA Finals broadcasts. She wasn't just the biggest name in women's basketball. She was the sport's first bona fide crossover superstar in decades. The WNBA leaned into it hard. Every Fever game was promoted heavily. ESPN, ABC, and streaming networks fought for broadcast rights. Headlines framed her as the savior of the sport, the player who could finally push women's basketball into mainstream relevance. Even her critics acknowledged her impact. Whether they liked her or not, they couldn't deny that people were watching because of her. But hype is a double-edged sword. The same tidal wave of attention that boosted Caitlyn's profile also set her up for impossible standards. Every game was supposed to be must-see TV. Every shot had to go viral. Every matchup had to break another record. And if it didn't, the backlash would come fast and hard. That's exactly what happened in the playoffs. The Fever, despite Caitlyn's heroics throughout the season, weren't built for a deep postseason run. They were young, inexperienced, and inconsistent. Clark could score 30 and still lose by double digits because the team around her wasn't ready for the spotlight. Fans who had tuned in expecting a Cinderella story instead saw a rookie battling uphill with a roster still years away from contention. For die-hard fans of women's basketball, this was nothing new. Building a franchise takes time. But for casual viewers who had been sold on the Caitlyn Clark phenomenon, the lack of instant success was enough to make them turn the channel. That's where the 47% drop came from. Not a sudden lack of interest in Caitlyn herself, but a mismatch between the narrative and the reality. Another factor. Viewer fatigue. By the time the playoffs rolled around, Caitlyn had been everywhere for months. Every game was broadcast, every highlight clip dissected, every storyline exaggerated. For some casuals, the saturation point hit. Without a deep playoff push to refresh the narrative, the excitement plateaued. And then there's the role of critics. From the beginning, not everyone was thrilled about Caitlyn's meteoric rise. Some felt her popularity overshadowed veterans who had been carrying the WNBA for years. Others argued the hype machine around her was more about media narrative than basketball itself. When the ratings dipped, those critics pounced. "See," they said. "We told you this was a fad. People aren't really here for women's basketball, they're just here for Caitlyn, and even that's fading." But that interpretation misses the bigger picture. Caitlyn's rookie season still produced the highest sustained ratings the league had seen in decades. Even with the playoff decline, her numbers dwarfed most games before her arrival. The tune-out wasn't the end of her effect. It was the correction of a narrative that had been inflated beyond what any single player could realistically deliver. The truth is, no one player, not Michael Jordan, not LeBron James, not Serena Williams, can carry an entire sport alone forever. They can ignite a spark, but the fire requires more fuel. For the WNBA, the challenge isn't whether Caitlyn can keep breaking records every week. It's whether the league can build on her impact to create sustainable growth across teams, stars, and markets. Fans tuned out in the playoffs for reasons that have nothing to do with Caitlyn's talent or charisma. They tuned out because the Fever weren't ready to contend. They tuned out because casual viewers move on quickly when the story shifts from dominance to struggle. They tuned out because revolutions don't happen in one season. But while critics use those numbers as proof of overhype, the smarter perspective is this. The fact that so many people tuned in to begin with shows how much Caitlyn has already changed the game. A ratings dip isn't the death of a movement. It's a reminder that growth takes time. Caitlyn herself seems to understand this better than anyone. She hasn't lashed out at the media. She hasn't tried to spin the numbers. She hasn't blamed her teammates or made excuses. She just keeps showing up, playing hard, and letting her game speak. That quiet focus is part of why her fans remain so loyal, because they know she's in it for the long haul, not the short-term hype cycle. There's also an important point about visibility. Even with fewer viewers during the playoffs, Caitlyn's games were still discussed more than most WNBA matchups in history. Social media buzzed with her highlights. Sports talk shows debated her impact daily. Her name dominated headlines. That kind of relevance doesn't vanish overnight because of one stat. If anything, the conversation around the ratings drop only proved how much attention she commands. And here's the irony. The critics who claim the hype is dying are the same ones keeping her name alive by obsessing over every dip, every stumble, every piece of data that can be twisted into a gotcha moment. They can't ignore her. Even when they want her to fail, they end up fueling her relevance. So why did fans tune out? The short answer, because hype is fragile, casual attention is fickle, and revolutions are messy. The long answer, because the WNBA hasn't yet built the infrastructure to fully capitalize on what Caitlyn brings. That's not on her shoulders. That's on the league, the teams, and the media to turn a moment into momentum. A 47% drop sounds like disaster, but history tells a different story. Michael Jordan didn't win in year one. LeBron's Cavs missed the playoffs his rookie season. Serena lost her share of early matches. Greatness isn't defined by instant, unbroken dominance. It's defined by persistence, growth, and the ability to turn setbacks into stepping stones. Caitlyn Clark has already proven she can do that. The pressure of hype versus reality is brutal, but it's also what makes her story compelling. Fans tuned out when the fairy tale slowed down. But when Caitlyn and the Fever rise again, and they will, those same fans will come running back. Because love her or hate her, nobody can look away for long. The moment the numbers dropped, Caitlyn Clark's critics pounced like wolves. A 47% ratings decline wasn't just a stat to them, it was ammunition. For months they'd been waiting, circling, questioning whether the hype could last. Now, finally, they had a data point they could wave around like a banner. See? It was all smoke. People don't really care about her. The league got carried away. It's the oldest pattern in sports media. Step 1. Build a star. Step 2. Inflate expectations to impossible heights. Step 3. The second that star falls even slightly short, tear them down. The media loves a rise, but it loves a fall even more. And Caitlyn's rookie year was a perfect storm for this cycle. She didn't just arrive in the WNBA, she arrived with more hype than any player before her. That made her a magnet for both love and hate. The critics weren't entirely wrong. The hype around Caitlyn was massive, sometimes exaggerated, and not always fair to her or her teammates. She became the singular face of a league full of talent, and that spotlight created tension. Players who had grinded for years without receiving half the attention suddenly found themselves overshadowed. Analysts who wanted to give credit to veterans instead had to start every segment with Caitlin Clark. That kind of imbalance creates resentment. So when the playoffs came around and the Fever stumbled, critics saw their chance to reset the narrative. Headlines shifted from "Caitlin Clark saves the WNBA" to "Caitlin Clark ratings collapse." Commentators began questioning whether she was overexposed. Social media lit up with hot takes, some mocking her fans for being bandwagoners, others arguing she wasn't ready for the spotlight, still others insisting the hype was purely media-driven and never about her skill. But here's where the backlash cycle reveals itself. The very fact that Caitlyn's ratings drop became headline news shows just how big she already is. When was the last time a rookie in any sport had their team's viewership numbers dissected in national media? Nobody runs segments on the local ratings of a first-year player unless that player is seismic. The criticism itself proves her significance. And Caitlyn? She didn't take the bait. No clapbacks on Twitter. No angry press conferences. No defensive interviews. Just quiet focus. She played her games, answered questions with calm professionalism, and let the storm swirl around her. That silence frustrated her critics, because what they wanted most was a reaction. Without it, they were left shouting into an echo chamber while she kept building her legacy brick by brick. For fans, the backlash cycle felt all too familiar. They'd seen it before with women athletes across sports. Serena Williams was called too brash, too emotional, too dominant. Ronda Rousey was built up as unstoppable and then torn down the second she lost. Simone Biles was celebrated as the greatest gymnast alive, then scrutinized the moment she chose mental health over competition. The pattern is clear. Women athletes are allowed to be revolutionary only until they stumble. Then the knives come out. Caitlin Clark is living that cycle in real time. The same media outlets that plaster her face across every platform are now questioning her draw. The same pundits who praised her as a generational talent are nitpicking every flaw. That's not an accident. It's the system feeding itself. Build them up, tear them down, and cash in on both sides of the narrative. But Caitlyn's situation is unique in one critical way. She doesn't seem rattled. Most athletes, especially young ones, would feel the need to respond, to defend themselves, to explain. Caitlyn doesn't. She knows that her game, her presence, and her numbers will speak louder than any headline. Her silence is a weapon, and it's working. Fans notice. Every time a critic tries to drag her, her supporters flood social media with highlight clips, stats, and reminders of how much she's already done for the sport. Every negative article becomes fuel for her base to amplify her even more. In a twisted way, the critics keep her name alive. They can't stop talking about her, and in doing so, they keep her relevant. The media spin also reveals something deeper about the WNBA's growing pains. For years, the league begged for mainstream coverage. Now, thanks to Caitlyn, it has it, but that coverage comes with strings attached. With attention comes scrutiny. With hype comes backlash. With headlines come critics who see women's sports not as a movement to support, but as a storyline to exploit. Caitlyn is both the beneficiary and the victim of that shift. And yet, the numbers show the bigger picture. Yes, playoff ratings dipped 47%. But Caitlyn's rookie season as a whole still posted historic highs for the WNBA. Even her low numbers are higher than most games before she arrived. Critics can spin the dip as proof of failure, but the context tells a different story. One season does not define a revolution. The backlash cycle also misses another key factor: sustainability. The Fever weren't ready to win yet. Casual fans may have tuned out when the losses piled up, but sustainable growth comes from long-term investment, not bandwagon spikes. The WNBA has an opportunity here to turn Caitlyn's draw into broader interest in the league, to showcase other stars alongside her, and to build storylines that keep fans engaged even when one player's team struggles. Critics don't see that. They want instant gratification. They want to declare hype dead the moment numbers dip. But Caitlyn's supporters understand the long game. They know this isn't about one season, one playoff run, or one ratings chart. It's about shifting the culture of women's sports permanently. And that's why the backlash, while loud, won't stick. Because Caitlyn Clark has already changed the game. She's already brought millions of new eyes to the sport. She's already sparked debates that no other rookie could have. A 47% drop isn't the end. It's a chapter in a much larger story. So yes, the critics got their moment. Yes, the media spun its headlines. Yes, the backlash cycle played out just as expected. But Caitlyn Clark is still standing, still playing, still growing. And the louder the critics get, the more obvious it becomes. They can't look away. Caitlyn Clark's rookie season was never going to be a straight line to perfection. The 47% playoff ratings drop looked dramatic, but it wasn't the collapse her critics wanted it to be. It was simply the messy reality of what happens when one young player is asked to carry an entire league's momentum on her back. The truth is, Caitlyn already did what no rookie before her had done. She sold out arenas, drove record merchandise sales, brought millions of new eyes to the WNBA, and turned casual fans into active participants in the conversation. That doesn't disappear because of one playoff series. If anything, the fact that her ratings became headline news proves how much she matters. Before Caitlyn, nobody cared enough to measure these numbers this closely. Her critics can spin the decline as overhype, but they miss the point. A low for Caitlyn still outpaces the highs most of the league had seen before her arrival. The Fever weren't ready to win yet, and fans tuning out in the postseason says more about casual attention spans than it does about her staying power. Legends aren't defined by a rookie season. They're defined by what they build over years. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Serena Williams. None of them became icons overnight. Caitlyn Clark is in that same conversation, not because of a flawless beginning, but because she's already shifted the culture. So don't mistake one dip for the end of the story. The Caitlyn Clark effect isn't dying. It's evolving. The revolution isn't waiting in the future. It's already here, and she's just getting started. If you're here for the full journey, the drama, the wins, the setbacks, the growth, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and tell us in the comments. Is Caitlyn Clark just getting started, or has she already changed women's basketball forever?